You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 CBS Radio.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. You're listening to us on CBS radio station 1580 AM in the Washington, D.C. area, or on the web at WMClive.com, where you can find links to podcasts of all our previous shows, or you're downloading or subscribing to the program on iTunes. Today's show celebrates language and literature. 3 American writers are my guests: popular, controversial, prolific Judy Blume, the former poet laureate Rita Dove, and the great storyteller Ursula K. Guin. And there's verbal karate and words from Toni Morrison, too. But first, we need to go inside the headlines. This week we go inside the headlines to a new branch of economics that is looking for a more satisfactory measure of human well-being than money. In fact, they're looking to measure by happiness itself. This idea has penetrated the policy arena, starting in Bhutan, where the concept of gross national happiness, honestly, GNH, shapes the planning process. All new policies are supposed to have a GNH assessment similar to the environmental impact assessment common in other countries. What makes people happy? Well, it seems 4 main factors are at work: gender, personality, external circumstances, and age. Women, by and large, seem happier slightly than men. I stutter on that because if you look at our condition, I don't know what warrants it, but anyway, we are happier. 2 personality traits shine through the complexity of the economists' analysis of this. One is neuroticism, and the other is extrovertism. Well, you can imagine which tends toward the happier. Then there's the role of circumstance. Relationships, education, income, and health all shape the way people feel. Being married, for example, gives men a considerable uplift, not so much women. And lastly, and most importantly, there's age itself. This is called the U-bend, like a U-turn. In other words, turning around and being happier later on in life. So there's stress that rises in the early 20s, and then falls sharply. Worry peaks in middle age and falls, and then there comes age. When people tend to get more mellow, one theory is that it's the death of ambition and the birth of acceptance. Another is that it's the uniquely human ability to recognize our own mortality and sort of not sweat the small stuff. But the interesting thing about whatever the causes of the U-bend are is that it has consequences beyond the emotional. It doesn't just make people happy, it also makes us healthier, and more productive. We live longer. So, the grayer the world gets, the brighter it seems to become, which is hope for all of us, those of us who are already older and those of us who hope to live to be. Our first guest, Judy Blume, started publishing in 1969, and the following decade was very prolific. She came out with some of her best-known titles, such as Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, and other books that really revolutionized writing for young children and teens. But she also wrote for older folks, grown-ups. Her novels Wifey and Smart Women and Summer Sisters have all been bestsellers. Judy Blume has won more than 90 literary awards. Welcome, Judy, to Women's Media Center Live. It's delightful to have you here.
Thank you so much.
You revolutionized literature for young women. Just the act of writing was an act of revolution for you, as well as...
It was for me. Well, I mean, I was a creative child, and I was happy, it seems to me, as long as I had that creative outlet. But then along came real life, married at 21, which we did then, 2 babies by the time I was 25.
Wow.
And and I desperately needed that creative outlet, and nobody was offering it to me, and so that is when I started to write. And yeah, I often tell young writers about, what makes success, and it's every bit determination as much as talent. You can have all the talent in the world, and if you're not determined, it might not happen.
I always say it's the perspiration, 90% perspiration, 10% inspiration. But what you did is not only right, but you wrote audaciously. I mean, you in those first books, which had never been done for young people, much less young girls. Masturbation, bullying, divorce, religion. I mean, these were considered absolutely shocking subject. I know you were attacked by the right wing. I know there were drives to get your books out of libraries. I also know that hundreds of thousands of young girls had their lives changed and freed by those books. How did you come to the content in that way?
But that's what's so funny. I didn't ever say, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to revolutionize, literature for young women. It never occurred to me. I was just writing about things I knew about and things that had been important to me. And I was young, and so my young self was right there. I remembered everything. And it was kind of like, I was really, really interested in puberty, and nobody was ever talking to me about it.
Yeah.
And I would have liked a book like this, like Are You There, God, It's Me, Margaret. I was so much a Margaret kind of kid, and when it came to religion, it was such a personal thing for me. I mean, my little bargains with God and my chats with God. I mean, I felt this burden of having to keep my father safe. I mean, I when I look back, it's the child I was up to 12 who interests me much more than after, the teenager, when all I wanted to be was be like everybody else.
Well, you and everybody else, because that's right around 12 is when the little girl who has, had her hands on her hips and said, I think and I want and you're not the boss of me and stuff like that, suddenly begins to qualify. I mean, all the pressures rush in, and she suddenly says, I'm probably wrong, but, or I'm sure this is stupid, but, so it's not just you,
Yeah.
What are you working on now?
I'm writing now what is for me, they're always impossibly difficult and impossibly complicated.
Yes.
And I don't know why this one should be any different, but this one is has been going on for a long time, because the idea came to me in 2009. I know exactly where I was, and it was like the light bulb went off over my head, and I said, I have this story I have to tell. It's set in my hometown of Elizabeth, New Jersey, in the early 50s. And it's fiction, but it's based on some true events that happened there. And it allowed me to do research, really, for the first time, and I just fell in love with doing research.
Wow.
And all my nonfiction writer friends say, yeah, that's the fun part, but wait till you have to sit down and write the book.
Yeah.
And, of course, that's true. But I can't imagine writing ever again without this notebook filled with research. It's so, this is a book that's important to me. They all are, I guess. But, it's very personal, because I was a young person then, and this did happen.
Wow.
In my town, and nobody was talking to us about it.
Well, we'll look out for it nonetheless. It's a pleasure that it's on the way. Anyway, thank you so much for being with us and helping to celebrate making and makers here on Women's Media Center Live. And we'll keep an eye out for the next and all the many yet to come of Judy Blume.
Thank you so much.
We need to take a break here. This is Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan, and I'm that very Robin Morgan. When we return, we'll talk with Rita Dove, formerly the Poet Laureate of the United States.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 CBS Radio.
Welcome back. Our next guest, Rita Dove, served as Poet Laureate of the United States from 1993 to 1995, and she's the recipient of numerous literary and academic honors, among them the 1987 Pulitzer Prize in Poetry, the 1996 National Humanities Medal, and the 2011 National Medal of Arts. Welcome, Rita, to Women's Media Center Live.
Thank you, Robin.
Well, it's a joy to have you here, and it is a special joy to reconnect with you and to let our listeners listen in on a conversation with a woman who wrote the lines, Billie Holiday's Burned Voice. Oh, my God, Rita, in a poem that begins with that line and then ends with the line, if you can't be free, be a mystery. Oh, wow. Poet to poet. Hats off.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. That line has been a kind of I think it was a mantra for a certain generation of women who just come up to me and say, yeah, been there, know that, so thank you.
Well, you are justly celebrated, but the marvelous thing to me is the humility of your voice. You've said that you were committed to writing about the underside of history, and starting with Thomas and Beulah, the book about your grandparents. You've kept that promise. It's not a pretentious voice. It's a voice of deceptive simplicity and incredible lyricism.
Thank you so much. I mean, I couldn't be any other way. To me, it seems that all of us, human beings, actually live our lives in details and in those ordinary moments that mean incredibly much to us, and then you realize that they will never make it into the history books. And I think as a woman and as an African American, I grew up always seeing both sides of the story, growing up and seeing, this is what gets played out there, and this is the real life that goes on. So when I began to write, it was the real life that was the most exciting that I wanted to write about.
You come from a very interesting family, too. Let's take a minute and talk about that. Your dad was the first black research chemist who broke the race barrier in the tire industry?
Yes, he was. Of course, I didn't know that when I was growing up, and it's interesting. My parents were I think they were careful about making sure that we grew up without seeing all those kind of landmarks, if it were possible.
Mm-hmm.
So my father was, all I knew was that he was a scientist and that he worked very hard, and I could see him preparing for the presentations and things like that. And it wasn't until I was in college that I found out that he, in fact, had broken this barrier.
Interesting.
And I asked him, I said, why didn't you tell us when we were growing up? And he said, I wanted you to grow up with as little bitterness as possible. I wanted you to think that the horizon was yours to take as far as you could, and there was no need for me to lay that burden on you, which meant that he carried it.
And your grandparents, say a few words about Thomas and Beulah.
The Thomas and Beulah were my maternal grandparents. They're based on my maternal grandparents.
Yes.
Actually, my grandmother's name was Georgiana, but that messes up any line of poetry, so I changed her name. But they came up from Tennessee. My grandfather came up from Tennessee, truly on a riverboat, and my grandmother came from Washington, D.C. originally, and they met in Akron, Ohio. And when I first conceived of the book Thomas and Beulah, was probably when I was about 13. It's when my first curiosity began to grow, because I spent an entire summer practically every weekend with my grandmother, because my grandfather had died, and my parents said, well, you can't date yet. They were rotating people who would stay with my grandmother. And so since I wasn't allowed to date yet, I had the weekend. She began to reminisce about her husband, and he had led this life of playing playing in a little band and going up the the river in the Mississippi on a riverboat. And I
Wow.
thought, what is, and in that kind of arrogance of youth, I assumed, of course, I was the center, and my grandparents
Sure.
were, revolved around me. So from that moment on, I think I wanted to discover who they were, how they made it, what it was like to be to end up in the North after coming up from the South, and to make their way, so to speak.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you've unearthed and transformed through art a lot of African American history. The work that you did on the book, in fact, on Rosa Parks was amazing. Just recently on the show we had Jean Theo Harris. I don't know if you know that she's coming out with just came out with a new biography of how, in fact, deeply political and radical Rosa Parks was, and how her image was tamed for acceptability.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah. And it was it's an incredible piece of our history, of how they made her palatable in order to get this movement, jump started. It's really kind of amazing.
In effect, they did the same thing with Coretta Scott King, who in her own right was, it's very interesting. Now, something also that I want to talk about in terms of your work is the musicality. People are very afraid of poetry still, and one of the lovely things when you were laureate is that you pledged to try to help make poetry a household word, because somehow in our schools people are raised to fear and tremble at this dusty thing that was written by 19th century white men, pale males with beards, instead of this living, breathing thing that makes you laugh and cry and sit around the campfire the way poetry was born,
Exactly, yes.
And both the black movement, civil rights movement, and the women's movement at their inception expressed a lot of politics through poetry. Those were poetry readings where, 1,000 people showed up.
Yes, exactly. And everybody was chanting and singing.
Yes,
by the end.
exactly. Yeah. And poets, of course, are used to 12 people showing up. So it was a shock to my system, but a very welcome one. And your voice brings that back in part because of your subject matter, your choice of subject matter, but also because of your language and your musicality. I know that you play the cello or the viola da gamba, or both. Is it?
Well, actually, yes. I started playing the cello. I played it all through my 20s and 30s, and then switched to the viola da gamba, and began playing early music. And then when I couldn't carry my instruments around with me because I was traveling too much, I began taking voice lessons. I can't imagine not having music with me in my life. And I think that and it doesn't matter what kind of music it is either. I mean, though I was trained classically, actually, and love to sing opera, but I also love to sing jazz and blues, and and it just music.
It's music, yeah.
Yeah, it's music, and I know that comes from growing up around music, all kinds of music. The great storytellers of my youth, the women who could say, "Oh, well, let me tell you," and the whole voice would do that thing, and you were caught.
You got my attention.
Yes, and you said, okay, because this person knows that part of the way that it's how you tell a story that's going to work. So I think that's where my roots come from, and my absolute belief that if a poem doesn't sing, I don't see what the point of it is. Well, it has to sing in some way. It has some different kind of music, but I remember when I was poet laureate, one of the things that really shocked me was how many people were afraid of poetry. I mean, I knew that they were, but not to that extent. And I would get letters from people who said, they always started off with, "I don't know much about poetry." But
yep, right.
Or, I really don't. Always this kind of disclaimer, this fear of, well, I might be caught out and be thought uneducated and dumb, and then they would what follow would be the most incredible testimonies about a particular poem and how it changed their life.
Yes.
And I said, how did we come so far in this world that the thing that opens our hearts to each other has become such a feared thing?
Yes.
And that was when I made really a kind of formal pledge that I would always be on the side to bring poetry.
Well, you followed through on that. I think during your tenure as poet laureate, more people paid attention, and also because you were a musical, dramatic voice for poetry, and because you were the youngest ever to hold the post. My congratulations. And because you were the first African American woman. So a lot of the dispossessed, the disenfranchised, could claim you, and you took that responsibility and ran with it, for which I personally thank you as well. You were quoted as saying at one point that you thought it was important to acknowledge the human face of evil. And I remember that stuck with me because it's so crucial. It's another form of Hannah Arendt's The Banality of Evil. But as long as evil is made this thing that is superhuman or subhuman, then of course you don't have to take responsibility for it in ourselves, the Eichmann within.
I agree entirely. I think that when I made that comment, I made it specifically in terms of a poem of mine called Parsley, which deals with the Trujillo, the Dominican Republic, the Haitian massacre in the Dominican Republic in 1937, where he actually killed 20,000 Haitian blacks, and the only way he had of distinguishing them was having them pronounce a Spanish word with an R in it, and because they spoke a French Creole, they couldn't roll that R, like in a Spanish R. And I thought, this was such a horrific thing, but it also was terribly, terribly creative.
Yes.
And and I did not want to go there. I did not want to write about it. But I also thought that the ability for us to say, oh, that's evil, that's off to the side, it's too horrific, and therefore I don't want to think about it, also gives us the privilege of thinking that we have no kernels of cruelty in us as well.
Precisely.
And poetry also is particularly suited for doing, and that is to talk about all aspects of life, to reveal all aspects of life to us, and to help us get through it by bringing it out, so that we say, oh yeah, I felt that, or, oh yes, this someone else has also seen how terrifying this is.
Recognition is such a subversive thing, isn't it? If you can recognize, whether through laughter or through tragedy or through poetry. I mean, it's and then if you can move to empathy, that's the most subversive emotion of all.
Absolutely.
If you had to name what would be your greatest regret, or if you have no regrets, then your greatest sadness in life, what would that be? And comparably, what would you say would be your greatest pride?
Oh, my goodness. My greatest regret. Oh, there are so many, I think. There really are. I regret. This is. I don't even know if this is the greatest regret. But one of the regrets I have is that when I was in college, when I was in school, that I didn't dare to take some of the courses that I wanted to take, that I thought, they were outside of my discipline, that I did not, take Portuguese, or Chinese, things that I was very curious about, because, you had to get through school, you had to get your good grades, and though I did take a lot of courses, I think it was a failure of bravery on my part, and to do that, and I think that something that has always kind of propelled me for the rest of my life to not be afraid to do something that I'm going to be bad at.
Well, you're good at so many things, my dear.
But I think that all of us are, in some ways, we it doesn't feel good to be bad at anything, and yet I want to be a student all my life. So that's really one of my greatest regrets.
And your greatest pride?
My greatest pride is my daughter. It's that she can walk through the world with a confidence that I didn't have, and with a that she's also absolutely engaged, and I say that engaged, in the struggle, that she's a really smart, thinking human being who also seems to be kind of fearless and much savvier than I was at her age. So that confidence that she has, and that belief that she can just go out there, she can do this, that is my greatest pride.
Well,
really.
Understandably. It's amazing how many extremely smart, extremely accomplished, extremely feminist women, when I ask this, name their children.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's a human being.
Yes, and also they are the next generation. They're going to carry it on. And I really think that you should feel, I want to say, you should feel a little pride in that accomplishment, too, because you helped make that daughter of mine.
Well, that's quite an honor.
Absolutely.
I am decidedly auxiliary proud of your daughter and of my son, and of all our children and of ourselves, and of you, because although the poet part of you is the dearest part to me, you're a woman of letters. I mean, there are plays, there are novels, there are... If anybody listening to this has not recently read or reread Rita Dove, you have such a treat in store for you. And I thank you for being with us on Women's Media Center Live, and send you lots of love.
Oh, thank you, Robin. This was really wonderful. It's wonderful to reconnect, and love back.
And now it's time for verbal karate. This entry is from Unspinning the Spin, How to Decode the Hype and Say What You Mean, the Women's Media Center Guide to Fair and Accurate Language, by Rosalie Maggio, the word maven, with a preface written by Gloria Steinem and moi, yours truly. It will be out soon as an ebook. So this entry is anti-intellectual. These are really fun. No one actually comes out and says, I hate smart people. But by putting, in quotes, so-called and self-styled in front of, quote, intellectual, the scorn is clear enough so that few are interested in self-identifying as intellectuals. The anti-intellectualism, what I have called, you may remember, willful ignorance, in the United States has become so widespread that discussion about serious issues has been replaced by sound bites. News programs are largely infotainment, and facts are found wanting as opposed to feelings. Disparaging words conveyed in disparaging tones to put down the intelligent include egghead, bookworm, know-it-all, highbrow, smarty pants, pedant, nerd, and geek. Politicians tend to use adjectives like out of touch, ivory tower, unrealistic, and pie in the sky. Conversely, the term public intellectual is oddly positive. It's time for another break here at Women's Media Center Live, where I am persisting in being Robin Morgan. I'll be back with a 2-segment conversation with probably the greatest science fiction and fantasy writer alive today.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 CBS Radio.
And we're back again. Ursula K. Le Guin has published more than 60, that's 60, books of fiction, fantasy, science fiction, children's literature, poetry, drama, criticism, and translation. And she's the multiple winner of the highest awards in several literary fields. Among her honors are a National Book Award, 5 Hugo and 5 Nebula Awards, the Kafka Award, a Pushcart Prize, and the Harold Versal Memorial Award from the American Academy of Arts and Letters. She lives in Portland, Oregon, and I'm proud to say she's my friend. Welcome, Ursula, to Women's Media Center Live.
Good morning, Robin.
Well, I'm so glad that you're here. I want to start with talking about this specific new genre that I have discovered. It is an entire genre based on the question, what does Ursula K. Le Guin really write? Does she write science fiction? Does she write speculative fiction? Does she write non-realism or realism or fantasy ad infinitum? And I have discovered the answer to this question. I think she writes literature. Tell me.
Well, I was going to answer, does she write, realism, non-realism? I was just going to say yes.
That's another very good answer.
but I'll accept literature. Yeah.
What is this specifically an American disease, this categorization? I think of the Latin Americans with magical realism, with Borges, with Allende. I think of the Europeans with Kafka and Hesse, and the Brits, my God, from Swift and C.S. Lewis through Tolkien and Woolf. What is the problem we seem to be having here?
I think the problem stems from kind of early modernist theory, which sort of declared that realism was the only thing that made literature, and anything fantastic was essentially for children, was kind of outside the pale. And Americans tend to take these things awfully literally.
Yeah. What do you do with Shakespeare?
And then, of course, as fantasy and science fiction got established as successful commercial genres, that lowered them in the estimation of many of the critics and professors.
Because Tolkien is taught as literature in Britain. I mean,
but there's a lot of Brits who sneer at him. Well, he can't be for literature because children can read it, which would include books like Huckleberry Finn and Guin, but never mind. Yeah.
It's very irritating, and I think we should mount a campaign against critics and booksellers who categorize this way. It's completely arbitrary, and it has not.
Well,
you called it this wonderful
I've
thing.
been running that campaign for decades, Robin, and the thing is, I think there is a legitimate distinction commercially. There are people who read realism don't want to find themselves suddenly stumbling into science fiction without being warned.
I think they should.
To identify books by genre is okay. To judge them by genre is what's wrong. Is to say, if it's science fiction, it can't possibly be good.
Yeah.
If it's good, it can't possibly be science fiction. That's just arbitrary, as you say, and stupid.
And it is an imposition and against literature. It really is. It is
indeed.
It stinketh.
What are you going to do with a writer like Michael Chabon, who just waltzes across all those genre distinctions happily?
Well, I would argue that the great writers always do, and to me, you're one of them. But I have 3 questions from 3 Le Guinians. Now, you may wonder what a Le Guinian is, but a Le Guinian...
They live on the planet Le Guin.
That's absolutely correct. Just like, remember they used to say about Graham Greene's work that he wrote about a particular landscape that was Greenland? Well, Le Guinians inhabit Laguinia. And one question is from my son, who has wondered this since he was 13 years old. It is about the great teacher of Ged in the Earthsea books, and he whose name is followed with the silent. And how is it a hard G or a soft G in pronouncing Ogion?
I say Ogion.
Ogion.
Ogion. Yeah, the G's as in Ged are generally hard.
I thought since Ged was that maybe Ogion would be too, but I didn't know, and you should know.
In the dreadful movie they made of it here, they managed to call him Ogion.
Because
they didn't bother to ask the author.
Why would they do that?
The language he invented,
Why would they ever do such a thing?
Oh, well.
Yeah. All right. Now, the second question is much more complex and profound. It quotes you as having once said that the creative adult is the child who survived. And the question is, how did you save the child in yourself, and did you ever lose it?
No, I do. I think most artists. I think part of their survival as artists is the survival of the child in them. I don't mean that they're childish.
No, I know.
At all. And if let's not get off on the inner child, because that really spooks me.
Mm. You mean?
Although I think originally what was meant was simply that kind of not losing touch with your own origins, with who you have always been.
Mm. The you-ness of you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Because as soon as you see a baby, you realize, my God, it's a person.
Mm.
It takes very little time for the little newborn to, look at you from far, far away, and you realize that's a person looking out at you.
Yes, yeah.
And that's the you-ness.
And the quality of play also, of serious, real, wow, play, I think is needed.
Yeah, exactly.
If you lose that as an artist.
Kids are allowed to play, and so are artists.
Yeah, that's the good stuff about being an artist, yeah. You may starve to death, but you're going to play as you do it. And,
right.
And the third question is about your magnificent translations. The great Lao Tzu that you have done, which is my special love, and the Angelica Gorodischer work, Kalpa, and others. This is from a writer friend who herself, English is not her mother tongue, so she is very concerned about translation. Is there a special satisfaction, and what is it in translation for you, since you're such an amazing writer yourself?
Oh, I love it. I love translating because the author of the work did the really hard work. The author dug it up out of the earth and refined it into gold. And all I have to do is try to carry some of the gold over into my language. And there is an element of discovery and creation in it, but it's also almost like a word game. It has the satisfaction of solving a puzzle.
Yeah. So it's about language.
Brood about a word, and then maybe sometimes that's how to say it. So I love translating. I always have.
And you once said that your plotting is not your strong point. Characters and and language are. So this takes that away from your responsibility.
That's right. They figured out the plot and the characters, and the author does all the hard work, the really hard work. Translation it can be laborious, and of course I am a very lucky person. I only translate what I want to when I want to do it. A professional translator has to translate stuff they don't even like.
Yeah,
that is not.
That would be dreary.
That's not fun. But what I do is fall in love with something, and therefore want to know it more closely. And the way to know something closely is to put it into my own language. Either
that or teach it, yes, which is in effect the same thing.
Which I have not. I'm not good at teaching literature. I've tried it, and I don't have the knack.
Well,
but I do have some knack for this falling in love with the text and bringing it over into English.
I think your book's about writing, steering the craft, I think is an amazing guidepost.
Well, that's about writing, but it's not so much about reading. I am awed by people who can. I had teachers who taught me how to read, and I'm very grateful. And I mean all the way up through graduate school.
Yeah, which is a skill in itself. It is.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to ask one more question in this segment, which I will be drawn and quartered if I do not ask, which is about the feminist influence on your work, notably in Left Hand of Darkness, which I think was written out of sheer imagination before you became a feminist, but I'm not sure. But it goes straight through Tehanu and, oh my God, Lavinia, which you published right when I was trying to finish a novel, and which absolutely paralyzed me. It was so brilliant.
Oh, you shouldn't read novels when you're writing one.
Well, now I know.
That's very dangerous.
Thank you very much. Now I know. But yeah, talk a little bit about that. The feminist influence on your work.
Oh, well, I've always called myself a feminist, I guess, but the word has changed its meaning several times radically during my long lifetime.
Mm.
In 1968, when I was writing Left Hand of Darkness, I would have called myself a feminist because I had been brought up, thanks to my mother, on Virginia Woolf's feminist nonfiction.
Yes.
A Room of One's Own and Three Guineas. That's pretty heady stuff for a teenager.
It's good
Still.
stuff. Yes, it's great.
And then, after all, the American feminism and French feminism, there were some important texts came out in the early 60s, and I hadn't read them. And I was aware that the construction of gender, although we didn't have that phrase yet, was being questioned.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had a lot of help to get started on writing this book where I deconstruct gender rather radically.
Mm.
And then when well, very briefly, when feminism began to declare kind of that motherhood was a sort of a bad thing, I thought I couldn't be a feminist because I had 3 kids.
Oh,
and I felt I'd done the right thing in having them, and I was very fond of them.
We never did that, you know. It was a media myth.
But there were, you know what I mean? There was
yes,
a kind
I do.
of friendliness. I was a housewife, for God's sake.
Yes,
with
I know.
3 kids.
Exactly.
And I was not supposed to be a housewife with 3 kids.
Right.
So I felt like I couldn't be a feminist for a while. Then I got wise, and then all the wonderful the literary feminists came along and kind of told me what to read, and all the women writers I hadn't read and so on.
Mm.
And so I came back happily. But now when you say you're a feminist, now how you are understood, the understanding of the word has changed again. So it's very tricky.
Yeah. Well, the female characters, and for that matter, the male characters in your work and how they've changed, even let's say in the Earthsea books, you can see the consciousness shift and change and grow. And
that was literally consciousness raising happened to me
mm-hmm.
About the time that I finished the 3rd book of Earthsea, and then it took 17 years of kind of putting it away and letting it cook in my unconscious and thinking about other things consciously before I could write the 4th book and tell the same story but from a different point of view.
I'll say. We'll be back with more of Ursula K. Le Guin. Meanwhile, I'm still me, Robin Morgan, and this is still Women's Media Center Live. Don't go away.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 CBS Radio.
And here we are again. So let's pick up with the great Ursula K. Le Guin. I want to talk about the 3 new books, or the 2 books in 1 and 2 volumes that have just come out that are quite wonderful. The prose is The Unreal and the Real, Selected Stories. Volume 1, Where on Earth, and Volume 2, I love it, Outer Space, Inner Lands. And also the new book of poems, which is a new and selected, called Finding My Elegy, which has your best poetry to date in it and is absolutely sublime, poet to poet. Wow, Ursula, this time you really kicked out the jams. So have you been going around and talking to people about these wonderful books? And
yeah, to some extent. I don't travel much anymore, but
that's smart.
But I talk as much as possible.
When you travel, you get good stuff. Changing Planes was a wonderful book about sitting in airports and what happens then. But let's talk about the books of stories. How you chose them, which you discuss in one of the introductions, is hilarious and and in exactly the same tone we've come to expect from you, which is wise and unsentimental and loving and hilariously funny, and then hits you with a double kick.
Well, you want me to sort of repeat that? It's just that nobody would help me select them. I thought I would have an editor sort of pouncing over and saying, "No, we have to have this one," and so on. And actually, Gavin and Kelly, who are Small Beer Press, they did insist on just two stories being in, very short ones. But mostly what I was faced with just, I don't know how, I've written well over 100 short stories. And how do you pick?
Yeah, how do you pick?
You know. So I just, I would put them in the heaps and say, no, that can go out, but that one can't go out, until I finally got the heaps small enough. You know, and then I had to sort them, and which one goes where. You know, and if that's science fiction, or who cares? And that it was an extremely confused process.
Well, it doesn't show that. It seems organic and natural, and of course that's here. And I haven't yet. I'm not completely through them, but I haven't yet discovered an omission that has me outraged, writing you a long and very cranky letter as why this favorite one is not in. So far so good. And
good.
And the breaking of them up into Where on Earth and the outer space, inner lands, it was just absolutely brilliant. So it satisfies, I'm sure, the genre folks, but it also shows the span of your reach, which is considerable.
Well, good, because that is precisely what I was hoping to somehow do.
Yeah, well, it works. And now talk about Finding My Elegy, which is a new and selected poems from a number of the previous books, and plus these extraordinary new poems that you've been writing all this time, when you were complaining to me that I can't find my story, and all the while you were turning out these staggering poems, Ursula.
Well, but of course, you know, poems come all at once.
Yep.
And then, of course, you may work on them and come back and saw on the darn thing for months or years, but there is a satisfaction in writing a longer piece of prose fiction to me that is such a different satisfaction, because you come back to it day after day and it's there to be worked on. Mm-hmm. And it wants to be told, you know. And but I've sort of lost that. It's apparently an energy thing of being in my mid-80s. But the poems still come sometimes. And I do want to mention what you wouldn't know from the book, is that I belong to a group of working poets, a little, you know, peer group of poets for years now.
Yes.
With several of us have been in the group for quite a long time, and that almost every poem in the last half of that book, and some in the first half, come out of that group, and many of them were written to assignments that we give each other in the group. Mm-hmm. And they were worked over by the group so that I could take them home. I see what's wrong. You know, I just want to say this because I think for poets who work in solitude, some of them want that, but for some, to get into a group like this is just kind of life-giving.
The workshop experience.
A workshop, although a homegrown workshop.
Yes.
You know, one thing it does is it makes you write a poem that month.
Precisely.
Because you got to bring one.
Precisely. You know? Yeah, I have an artists' night group, which is actually mixed arts, music as well as poetry.
Oh, neat.
But it is pretty damn neat. You're right, and it if for no other reason, and there are other reasons, for the deadline, and it makes you come with something new. It's too humiliating to say I have nothing this week. Oh my, or this month. But
yeah, you feel kind of inadequate. Yeah.
Well, I know what you mean about long fiction or longer fiction, rather fiction as opposed to poetry, because it's a whole world that you inhabit and you can return to, whereas a poem can sweep you off your feet like a tsunami or a tornado and then be done with you.
And a short story can do that too. You know, a really short story may have to be written in a breath, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't write it then, it's gone, like a poem.
Ah, I have not written stories.
Grab it as it flies thing with short writing. And that makes it scary but exciting.
Yeah. Well, these poems are something else, and finding my elegy, even if people do not read poetry, is please treat yourself to this book. People should also know, and we've only got a minute or so left now, that you blog, and you blog the way that you write, which is great fun to read, and also then so there's this sudden little profound hit, and you think, well, wow. So
you know who taught me that I might be able to blog? Who
taught you?
Is the great Nobel Prize winner José Saramago, the Portuguese novelist. He blogged when he was 86 and 87. He was blogging.
Wow!
And I thought, hey, I could try that.
You can do that. Damn
yeah.
Right.
Nothing like having a good model, you know.
Well, it's so wonderful whether you're blogging about the new acquiring of being recatted with a new cat in the house, or whether it's the politics of the endless election that we just survived. It's a wonderful blog, and it's a literary blog, by which I don't mean it's just good for you. I mean it's fun, but it's also smart, and it's at www.ursulakleguin.com. I got that right?
You got that right. Mm-hmm.
And it also lists appearances that you'll be making or readings that you'll be doing. I see that there were none in New York, and that crushed my soul, but I'm glad for you that you don't have to travel.
Well, you've been too far away, Robin.
I know. Well, I'll have to get out there again. That's all. I'll have to come to Portland. You know, that's all there is to it. Oh, Ursula, thank you so much for doing this. It was
thanks for having me.
Absolutely lovely, and I'm very grateful, and I can't wait to see what comes out of you next.
Me neither.
And now it's time for Fighting Words. These words today are those of Toni Morrison, the great American writer, on her acceptance speech and Nobel lecture in Stockholm when she received the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1993. I urge you to read the entire speech. This is just a fragment. It's on language. Be it grand or slender, burrowing, blasting, or refusing to sanctify, whether it laughs out loud or is a cry without an alphabet, the choice word or the chosen silence, unmolested language surges toward knowledge, not its destruction. But who does not know of literature banned because it is interrogative, discredited because it is critical, erased because alternate, and how many are outraged by the thought of a self-ravaged tongue? Word work is sublime because it is generative. It makes meaning that secures our difference, our human difference, the way in which we are like no other life. We die. That may be the meaning of life. But we do language. That may be the measure of our lives. That's it for this week. You've been listening to what they call talk radio with a brain on CBS station WJFK 1580 AM radio, on iTunes, where you can subscribe to the show, and you can also find podcasts of all our previous shows on iTunes and at WMClive.com. Like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Views expressed here do not necessarily represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. WMC President and for this program Executive Producer Julie Burton, Senior Producer Crystal Williams-Chancellor, and our founding sponsor, Regina Kulik Scully. The theme music and the music for our features and breaks is variously by singer-songwriters Blake Morgan, Yanita, Melissa Geigas, and David Cloyd, all of them recording artists with ECR Music Group. I'm Robin Morgan. Thanks for being with us. Join us next week for voices, perspectives, news, and inspiring fun you can get only here on Women's Media Center Live.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, tune your radio to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 CBS Radio and WMCLive.com. Talk radio with a brain.